Welcome back to Reviews and Rankings with Robbie Sobel. With the recent release of 3 from Hell, I thought it would be a good time to take a look at Rob Zombie's FIREFLY Trilogy before ranking the films from worst to best. In the 1980s, Rob Zombie rose to prominence as the lead man in the rock band White Zombie, before eventually branching off as a solo act. Known for his elaborate presentation and hard rock style, Zombie embraced his niche and expanded on his brand in the form of eccentric music videos.
Or making scary sounds.
With his first love being for film since he was in his youth, it was only a matter of time before Zombie had a chance to get behind the camera for a movie of his own. Following the release of his critically acclaimed debut solo album Hellbilly Deluxe in 1998, Rob Zombie was hired by Universal Studios to design a haunted maze attraction, which eventually led to the revival of the Halloween Horror Nights annual event. Following its success, Zombie was able to come to an agreement with Universal to write and direct his first feature-length film in the form of House of a Thousand Corpses. In the year 2000, the 25-day production of House of a Thousand Corpses was split between shooting on the lot at Universal Studios, as well as on a ranch in Valencia, California. On a budget estimated to be around $7 million, House of a Thousand Corpses completed production and was ready for distribution in the latter part of the year. However, due to Universal Studios' fear that it would receive an NC-17 rating, the film was put on the shelf and ignored. It wasn't until Rob Zombie was able to reacquire the rights to the film for himself that he reached a deal with Lionsgate Entertainment as the film was finally ready for release, which took place in April 2003. House of a Thousand Corpses tells the story of 4 20-somethings on a road trip in 1977 looking to do research for a book on offbeat roadside attractions. Along the way, they stop at the Museum of Monsters and Mayhem, owned and operated by Captain Spaulding, played by the legendary Sid Haig. Spaulding tells the 4 about the local legend of Dr. Satan before giving the group a tour of his museum. After the group leaves in search of more research, they pick up a female hitchhiker named Baby, played by Sherry Moon Zombie herself. Baby asks to be dropped off at her house only a few miles away, but it's then that the group meets the rest of her family, which includes Otis, played by Bill Moseley, and Mother Firefly, played by Karen Black.
Please don't kill us.
Rob Zombie's inspirations are clear, as comparisons to 1970s horror films like Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is evident and reflected in the story and brutality, and Dario Argento's Suspiria in how Zombie used bright and vibrant colors in his cinematography. In House of a Thousand Corpses, the blood and gore are plenty, and in 2003, genre films were still recovering from the horror hangover of the 1990s, that, with few exceptions, pumped out mostly dull ripoffs of Wes Craven's Scream franchise. While an interesting and ambitious film, highlighted by the performances and characters of Captain Spaulding, Otis, and Baby, the back half of A House of a Thousand Corpses becomes a bit sloppy and uneasy, which is in part due to Zombie's lack of experience as a film writer and director. House of a Thousand Corpses received mostly negative reviews from critics, and set the stage for a director whose future films have been polarizing to say the least. Zombie has his loyal base who are diehard to the core, while many others cringe at the thought of his style, tone, and writing. Despite its critical failure, House of a Thousand Corpses earned more than double its budget at just under $17 million, which paved the way for an eventual sequel. In 2005, Rob Zombie released his sophomore directorial effort with The Devil's Rejects. The story follows 3 of the main antagonists from House of a Thousand Corpses, as Captain Spaulding, Otis, and Baby Firefly are on the run from law enforcement following the events of the first film. Otis and Baby were able to escape and take shelter in a motel while holding a visiting family hostage, as Mother Firefly has been taken into custody by police. After inflicting brutal acts of depraved violence and sexual assault on the family, Otis and Baby soon link up with Captain Spaulding as they eventually stare down law enforcement in one of the most memorable ending scenes in modern horror history. Unlike House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects was viewed more favorably by critics, with even many of Rob Zombie's usual naysayers giving his new film praise. Once again, the shining stars are in the performances of Bill Moseley, Sherry Moon Zombie, and Sid Haig, who all find a natural chemistry as the sadistic Firefly family. The brutality of the movie was a throwback to horror films of the 1970s, with The Devil's Rejects presenting a more realistic take on the genre in comparison to House of a Thousand Corpses. Following the release of The Devil's Rejects, Rob Zombie went on to direct several more films, including his remake of Halloween and its sequel, as well as The Lords of Salem and 31. As the years went on, it seemed like the Firefly family was dead and buried, until rumors of a third entry into the series began to surface. In 2018, news broke that Rob Zombie was back in the director's chair and would be filming the conclusion of his now trilogy of Firefly films in the form of Three from Hell.
The search for the fugitives known as the Devil's Rejects resulted in a violent clash with police.
The story jumps off from the conclusion of The Devil's Rejects after the Firefly family was gunned down in a blaze of glory by law enforcement.
Chances for survival are less than 1,000,000 to 1.
There's no justice in this world. I am justice.
Otis, Captain Spaulding, and Baby Firefly are all rushed to the hospital to receive medical assistance, where they defied the odds and made it out alive. The three create national headlines during their trial, where each one are convicted of multiple murders. Due to his failing health, Sid Haig was only able to shoot one short scene as his character of Captain Spaulding was written off to be killed by lethal injection in the opening act. Despite this, Haig is able to make the most of his limited screen time and provide Three from Hell, one of its most memorable moments.
I'm your bozo Jesus hung out to dry for the sins of mankind.
After breaking out of prison following help from his half-brother Foxy, played by Richard Brake, Otis blackmails a local police officer to free Baby Firefly and reunite the three. As they continue to be on the run from law enforcement, Baby, Otis, and Foxy find their way down to Mexico, which results in more sadistic violence that fans of the previous two entries will be pleased to see.
Hello, America. Did you miss me?
Three from Hell takes a similar tone as The Devil's Rejects, and provides a satisfying conclusion to the trilogy, even if it wasn't entirely warranted. Three from Hell was given a 3-day limited run in theaters, and after pulling in just shy of $2 million, earned an extra day to add to its profits. The first major review release came from RogerEbert.com, with critic Scout Tafoya calling it Rob Zombie's most earnest and laid-back nightmare yet, while giving the film a 4 out of 4-star review. Despite this, most critics were not pleased with Zombie's latest flick, though the contrast between fans and movie reviewers was once again evident in the lopsided tomato meter versus audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. With the overview of Rob Zombie's Firefly Trilogy in the books, it's time to rank the three films from worst to best. In at number 3 is Three from Hell. Heading into 2019, Three from Hell was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. Unfortunately, the film didn't do that much for me after the intense opening scene, due in part to the film's low budget that is just not enough to fulfill Zombie's aspirations. Even with Bill Moseley and Sherry Moon Zombie playing their roles well, in addition to a solid performance by Richard Brake, the story hits a wall at the start of the second act and doesn't pick up until the film's conclusion. Die-hard fans of Rob Zombie and the Firefly family will find enjoyment in the movie, but outside of that core audience, I can't recommend it, as Three from Hell settles in with an average rating of 2.5 stars out of 5. Landing at the number 2 spot is House of a Thousand Corpses. When House of a Thousand Corpses was first released in 2003, it was quickly labeled with a negative reputation that was hard to overcome. While I wasn't the biggest fan at the time, it has since grown on me with its interesting characters and performances, striking visuals, well-done special effects, and a story that is simple but effective. While the first two-thirds of the film are enough to keep the viewer engaged, the third act is where it spirals out of control to the point where I'm usually left scratching my head. Though the ending portion of the movie leaves much to be desired, there's still enough to recommend to horror fans looking for a wild ride at the Museum of Monsters and Madmen, delivering a 3-star out of 5 rating. And in the top spot at number 1 is The Devil's Rejects. Rob Zombie's second film is still considered his best by many, and it's not hard to see why. The direction Zombie takes his story is more realistic, and it's felt from start to finish. Zombie's use of cutting creates an uncomfortable and tense atmosphere, compounded by solid acting performances, which is highlighted by Bill Moseley's portrayal of Otis. The ending scene of the Firefly family driving into almost certain death at the hands of law enforcement, all while Leonard Skinner's Freebird plays in the background, is as memorable of an ending as you will ever find. Not for the faint of heart, The Devil's Rejects is a modern horror classic and highly recommended with a 4.5 out of 5-star rating. I hope you enjoyed Rob Zombie's Firefly Trilogy review and ranking, but what are your thoughts? Leave them down in the comments below, and if you could, hit the like button and subscribe. If you're on Instagram, you can follow me at Robbie_upgrade. So let's keep watching movies, and thanks for checking out the channel.